Hey guys, welcome to the Son of Wanda. Episode 9 of Andor has released, so let's conversationalize. What's up guys? So overall, this episode made me cry in pain and laugh in disgust at some moments, but also it made me go, that actually wasn't bad. That was actually pretty good. That may have actually been really good. So definitely some mixed emotions. Overall, I think this is one of my more favorite episodes, one of the better ones because of some of the stuff it reveals, because of the way they go about certain things and certain plot lines that I was like, oh, I liked that. I enjoyed that. It was nice to enjoy something in this show after a few episodes of, not enjoying hardly anything, except like one scene of political thriller. But yeah, some tensions rising. I'm actually looking forward to seeing some of the stuff that happens next. So overall, I'd give this one maybe like a thumb this way. That there's definitely some stuff keeping it from a total thumbs up. Some like maybe a few plot holes and just some bad choice of story arcs. Starting off, Miro, covered in the last episode, they started that whole plot line of her about to torture Bix, and she's, just giving her, typical bad guy spiel type stuff about, making metaphors and comparing her to a fish and, stuff like that. Miro's trying to figure out who the Axis is. And we know the Axis is Luthen, but, of course, Miro doesn't know that. So she's trying to figure out who he is, as well as she's asking, the main question she's asking Bix is, when did Bix last meet with Andor? And Bix won't tell her. So Miro has her really creepy torture dude, like torture scientist guy, named Gortz, I think, or Gortz, or Gorst, something like that. And, this dude is, really scary in the sense that he's very casual. And he's not really intimidating at all. He's just a very casual, young, skinny British dude he's not old, he's not creepy like most of the torture guys depicted in different media. He's just kind of, young, unassuming. But that kind of makes it creepier because he starts talking about, how they made this device to torture people. And they made this machine that can kind of mimic the screams of alien children that were slaughtered by the Empire, I assume years before. So, yeah. That's dark. and I feel like that's a little bit of an issue because it's just, yeah, Star Wars has gotten pretty dark before in Clone Wars and Rebels, but I feel like, torturing someone by putting this machine on their head and making them hear these apparently mind destroying sounds. Apparently the sounds of whatever these alien children made kind of scramble people's brains based on the story that this creepy scientist guy tells. And so that's kind of dark to another level. Oh, you were going to torture this person by making them hear the sounds of screaming, dying children. Even if they are from an alien species, that's really dark. And it might be unnecessarily dark. Because again, like I said in my previous videos, one of George Lucas's main things for Star Wars that he always wanted to try to keep and uphold after he made it was Star Wars is primarily made for children. Now, yes, you could argue a lot of the stuff in Clone Wars and maybe even a few things in Rebels aren't exactly kid-friendly, especially some of the stuff in Clone Wars, but you try to keep that heart and spirit. And since the show has already not tried or seemed to try to keep that children spirit at all, it's just kind of a nail in the coffin in that sense. Not necessarily to the whole show, but a nail in the coffin of you've kind of just, the spirit is gone. The childlike sensibilities are gone. And that's unfortunate. And that is a big criticism I have with the show. Part of the reason I don't think it's Star Wars. But Bix gets tortured. Meanwhile, Andor's in prison. And throughout this episode, the old dude that's working with him and the rest of his group, working on the factory stuff in the prison that Andor met in the last episode, he's kind of been in pain. His hand starts out being in pain, but he only has 40 shifts left. And I do like in this episode, Andy Serkis' character, Kino Loy, gets to be more human Like, you can tell he's not heartless. Like, he's firm, and yeah, he's mean, but he's not heartless. And so he's even, like, excited when he tells the older guy, his name is Olaf. Andy Serkis' character is even excited when he's like, hey, Olaf, you get to go home soon. You only have, like, 40 shifts left, which I assume, again, is, like, 40 days, which 40 does sound like a lot, but in relevance to the days, or the amount of days I assume that Olaf has already been there, that would be relatively little. So relatively little time left to spend in the prison, considering all the stuff he's been through already. But yeah, Kino's excited. He's like, hey, you get to get out. Isn't that great? You get to go home. And he's genuinely excited for him. And I really appreciated that they actually gave Kino Loy, a heart. That he's like, he's not a totally bad guy or totally mean person. Yeah, he wants to get out of prison just like every other prisoner. He's gruff. And yeah, he's mean at sometimes, but he's not a complete cruel maniac like the Empire. But Andor himself, he's been trying to figure out how to escape. He's kind of been collaborating with one of the other prisoners on how exactly to, get through the guards and do this and do that. And he even takes one of his, I think he calls it a run. I assume he means the bathroom, because he goes to the bathroom. But he takes a bathroom break, and there's a panel on the side of the bathroom wall that he's like been removing the panel board from and trying to slice through this metal pipe with this metal knife. I guess to rupture the pipe somehow. That might cause a disruption. That might be a distraction for them to escape. I don't really know how that works. That was another kind of plot hole that I thought about, was the fact that the panel's really beat up. So clearly it can be taken off easily. And you'd figure the Empire, given how thorough they are in this prison, or how many contingencies they have in case prisoners try to escape, you'd figure that they would, especially contingencies that are established later in this episode, oh boy, how strict the Empire is and how horrible they are, but you'd figure they would scan this bathroom or walk beside this bathroom and be like, this panel looks a little damaged. I wonder if any prisoner's been trying to mess with it inside, and then just take it off and find the marks on the pipe. And then they would interrogate the prisoners. But clearly that hasn't happened, so probably will play out in the next episode, hopefully. But it's just kind of a plot hole to me, that no Imperial figured it out. Although based on the plot hole I brought up in the last video, the Empire, they are all idiots. They are very much all established as utter and complete morons. And speaking of plot holes, back when Miro was interrogating Bix and asking when was the last time Bix met up with Andor, and Bix wouldn't tell her. One, it's weird that Bix would be subject to such torture, or would subject herself, like by not telling them would subject herself to such torture, when it's not like telling them the last time that she met Andor would be detrimental to Andor. I mean, she still has no idea where he is. So that wouldn't really give the Empire that much of an idea where to find him. Like he was on Ferrix, and then he left. There really isn't that much to go on. She eventually does tell the Empire when she met up with Andor last, when Andor came to see her in Episode 7. She does tell them that, but we don't see her tell them that. The Miro just says that she ended up telling them eventually, later in the episode. So she breaks, which is completely understandable considering the kind of torture, like I mentioned before, that they did to her, and to the other shop owner that was covering for her to contact Luthen via that radio thing, who the shop owner is apparently going to get hanged, so that's lovely, yikes. But yeah, she broke. So she gave Miro and the ISB more information about Andor, and, now Bix referred to Luthen as the buyer. So that gave Miro kind of more insight to okay, so he's definitely hosting all these operations for these different people and buying different things from different people that he can use for the rebellion, but constantly, using different resources, never getting all the same stuff from all the same place. Like Luthen's using a bunch of different resources for this rebellion. And so they are on Luthen's tail, probably more so than Andor's, because they have no idea where Andor is, even though they technically have captured Andor already without knowing it. Still don't know how that works, but they are more on Luthen's tail, and so Luthen should have a lot more reason to be cautious. And it was funny because when Miro was interrogating Bix was like, even if I told you the stuff you want to know, you wouldn't believe me anyway, and you would still just torture me. And Miro's like, that's probably true. I'm just going to torture you anyway because I enjoy it. That's essentially what that scene implies. And it's just weird to me because up to this point, Miro has been such a go-get 'em, like accomplish the goal, find out what we need to find out. And she just talked about how she didn't want to waste her time. So if like Bix is in like serious pain and tells her something, you'd figure Miro would just believe it and like, take her word for it, even if she's not fully trusting of her, just to, go have something to go off of to work with so that she can move forward, because she seems like a go-getter, kind of like, we need to move forward with this even if we don't have very much information, or very like, even if this information might not be solely truthful. Just she seems like that kind of character. Miro does. So it's just funny to me that she would just, I enjoy torture and I'm not going to believe you anyway just because I enjoy torture. I don't know if that's her kind of character. Maybe she just hates rebels so much that she just wants to constantly torture them because they're rebels, or collaborating with rebels in Bix's case. So, another slight plot hole for me. Mon Mothma's in the Senate building, again pleading her case that the Empire is just overreaching way too much, and addressing the fact that the Empire has become oppressive and that they have been pressing down way too hard on these systems and forcing the citizens to their breaking point. But once again, no one seems to believe her. And once again, we don't seem to have any Emperor. You'd figure he'd be right in the middle of the Senate chambers, watching all of this, seeing all of this, interacting with all of this like he did in the Republic. I mean, I get that the Empire's definitely not the same as the Republic, but still, it's like Sidious was there at the end of Revenge of the Sith in the middle of the Senate chamber, like the leader of everybody. So you'd figure that he would be the leader in this case. It just, again, it seems like they're like purposefully trying to avoid a cameo, which is not cool. And they also already had a cameo in Admiral Yulorn, because apparently that was actually Admiral Yulorn. I was right about that. And I forget, one of the recent episodes that Yulorn came up, I believe it was episode 7, like when he was in charge of the ISB, like announcing the new rules about the Empire to the rest of the ISB people. That was him. So I was right about that, and he was a cameo. That counts as a cameo because he's a really important character in Clone Wars, and he has he appears in one episode, Rebels. It's a cool cameo, but he is important, and he was a cameo. So you'd figure maybe Ian McDiarmid might show up as, the Emperor of the Galaxy, like he is in Star Wars, the Star Wars universe. Stop avoiding big cameos. Use it when it's necessary. And it's funny because I feel like a complaint that has been made against The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett is that it was like they overdid the cameos. Like they were just doing cameos for cameos' sake. And I really don't think so. I even think in those stories the cameos fit well for the story. Like it made sense that Mando met Ahsoka, and spoiler alert, it made a lot of sense that Luke found Baby Yoda at the end of Mandalorian. So like those cameos make sense. I don't really understand why people get upset at those cameos. And not to mention, cameos are awesome. Like I've told you guys before, I'm the fan service guy, so I'm not one who's ever going to criticize cameos. So hence, I would love a Sidious cameo in this show. Not just because it would be a cameo, but it would make sense. Like you want to see him working with the Empire and talking to the Empire and seeing kind of how that part of the Imperial oppression went down, was maybe his oppression of the Senate and his manipulation of the Senate. We got to see him as the Chancellor manipulate the Republic and the prequels and the Clone Wars, but we haven't really gotten to see the intricacies of him manipulating the actual Empire as the Emperor, like in the Senate chambers, like he did with the Republic. So I would love to see that, and this show could do that. Hopefully, if for a season 2, because they don't really seem concerned about it in season 1, but hopefully for a season 2 they may add that as a major plot point. I would love that because I think it would be really cool to see it. But Mon Mothma, it's you kind of get the hints like that there's parts of it that are kind of like the rousing speech, or meant to be the rousing speech, and I feel like they could have saved some of those lines for a more like rousing speech for the Senate that maybe made more people realize how bad the Empire is and how oppressive the Empire is. But the way that kind of plays out just seems lackluster, and I get that you kind of have these moments to show that Mon Mothma's not being heard at all, and like her voice isn't mattering to the Senate anymore, which is why she ends up just fully joining the rebellion later, even though she seems to have great reservations about anything that's remotely shady in this episode, which I mean is understandable for a person of her standard that has been for a person of her standard that has been established previously, the standard that she has. Like, she doesn't want to go to war, she doesn't want anybody to get hurt, she doesn't want anybody to be oppressed more than they already have been. She just wants as peaceful of a resolution to the Imperial problem as possible. Unfortunately, she's slowly coming to terms with the fact that that's just not going to work. You can't have a peaceful resolution with the Empire. You can only have a forceful resolution with the Empire, which has been Saw Gerrera's approach for like almost 2 decades at this point. But she gives a rousing speech, or kind of attempts to give a rousing speech, has some of that in there. Nobody really seems to care that much. You can hear a few other people say, down with the Empire, but it's not enough to like sway the Senate or anything, or cause that much of a disruption. She really is trying, but it's not working. Then we get word that her cousin has shown up at her house, and I had no idea who her cousin was. I was like, wait, another relative. I didn't know Mon Mothma had this many relatives. And lo and behold, Vel is Mon Mothma's cousin. I will admit, I clapped. I clapped for that reveal. I thought that was a genuinely good reveal. It made certain things make a lot more sense. Like the fact that, like, how did Vel know Luthen in the first place? Because they said in the episodes previously that Vel was the only other one besides Andor who could be traced back to Luthen. And this seems wise. Her connection to Mon Mothma as her cousin, and I assume Mon Mothma clearly introduced Vel to Luthen, so Vel could help Luthen in his rebel endeavors. I assume that's how that all worked out. And it explains why Luthen was so nervous, because not only, if the Empire had captured Vel, not only could they have traced Vel back to Luthen, they could have also traced Vel to Mon Mothma, and that would have ruined Mon Mothma's position as a rebel completely. And Mon Mothma was like the most important part of the rebellion because she was the person funding it. So it made things make a lot more sense. I applauded the reveal, and it was a reveal that totally made sense. And, you know, Vel's masquerading around as this spoiled brat rich girl who, you know, bought Mon Mothma's daughter a dress. And Mon Mothma was like, man, it would be crazy if your dad actually let you wear that dress. She's talking to her daughter, and her daughter's like, well, Dad will let me do anything. You know, he lets me do it whatever I want. The daughter's actually the spoiled brat. She's a very insufferable character. It's kind of funny. She's like, oh gosh, like, you are really a spoiled brat jerk. Really, I mean, your dad has taught you horribly. And like, Perrin's also really insufferable as well, and they don't seem to be leading anywhere with that. They're just, you know, insufferable. I feel like they could be doing a few more interesting things instead of just constantly having these awkward family conversations where, you know, day in the life of the Hollywood celebrity where, you know, Perrin's mad at Mon Mothma and the daughter's mad at Mon Mothma because they're all spoiled and they love the Empire even though they actually know deep down that the Empire is horrible. Yada, yada, yada. Mon Mothma's concerned about Vel, and Vel's concerned about Mon Mothma because they are actually cousins. At first I thought it may have been a masquerade, that Vel wasn't actually Mon Mothma's cousin, but she is actually Mon Mothma's cousin, which again, good reveal. And so Mon Mothma's, you know, they're worried about each other, and Mon Mothma's like, maybe, like, Luthen's kind of having us going crazy. He's kind of just spinning us around in circles, you know, having us do, you know, very questionable things. But Vel's like in on it. Vel's like, we just need to stick to the plan. You took an oath. I assume Vel herself took an oath. And Vel's just, you know, she's on game. She's on point. She's like, we just need to beat the Empire by any means necessary. So she's kind of on the Luthen side of things, even if Vel definitely doesn't agree with all of Luthen's methods, like Mon Mothma doesn't. Meanwhile, Andor, back at the prison, is walking through the hallway with the other prisoners, this like large bridge kind of hallway thing, and they're like getting word from the other prisoners in this other bridge hallway that they can see, some of the guys can see through the window and communicate via sign language. And because of that, like, the one prisoner hearing some of the information coming from that hallway, also they're kind of being held up in their own hallway. They're kind of like, it's like traffic, like they're not really moving that much. All the guys are wondering, like, all the prisoners are wondering, like, what's going on. And, you know, apparently something's happened on the level 2 of the prison that they don't know what it is. This was good suspense. This was good tension building, because you really don't know, like, what is this? What are we doing right now? Like, what's going on? Like, what happened on level 2? Because they don't tell you exactly what happened until the end of the episode. And it makes you even more scared. Like, oh, wow, the Empire's really messed up. So they don't know. And, Kino Loy, Andy Serkis, you can tell dude is such a good actor because you can tell every emotion that he's feeling. He's like, you can tell he's panicked, but he doesn't want to admit he's panicked, and he's criticizing everybody else for being panicked. He's like, you shouldn't be panicked. You don't even know if, like, those guys are telling you correctly. Like, it takes forever for actual information to get to us in the prison anyway. We don't know what happened. We don't know if anything did happen. It's all just rumors and could be nonsense. So he's, trying to keep it together, even though you can tell that he's genuinely nervous. And then the lights flicker off for like a few seconds. And then they come back on, and all the guys are like, what was that? And like Andor's nervous, and all the dudes are nervous. And that was good tension building, because it really does make you wonder, like, okay, what is going on? Even if you don't like the show up to this point, which I really haven't, I was genuinely, okay, like, what was that? And they paid it off pretty well in the end. But we talked about something good. Now let's move on to something that wasn't so good. Let's move on to the Karn arc of the story. So you remember how last episode he met up with Lieutenant Miro and divulged the information that he had about what really happened on Ferrix to Miro. And Miro used that information to, better pursue her efforts in finding and tracking down the rebellion and all that. So, in this episode, Karn has yet another conversation with his mother, and his mother is the absolute worst. His mother is guilt-tripping him about, the mother's guilt-tripping him and talking about how she could have gone insane because of because of Karn constantly ignoring his mother, ignoring her, and yada yada yada, and trying to make him feel horrible about himself. Also, it was kind of only in this episode that I noticed how unusually big eyes she had. Like, it's kind of creepy and weird, kind of how big her eyes are. But she is like the absolute worst mother. And then Karn finally admits that he got a promotion at his job with his horrible suit and tie, we're in Blade Runner world, in supposedly it's Star Wars land outfit, and he tells her that he got a promotion because of what happened at the ISB. He doesn't mention the ISB part. He doesn't mention because of the ISB, but he just says that he got a promotion. And then she's proud of him. And then she's like, "Oh yes, you did so great," and pours more blue milk Cocoa Puffs in his bowl. And she's like, "Oh, you did so great, great." And he's like, whatever, because you're a horrible mom, and she is. And I suppose the scene would have had more oomph if they had, had just a better arc for him in the episode, or a better arc for his arc in the whole series in general. Because, wow. That scene was, whatever. It was there. It at least showed, I guess it gave a better view of how, like, horrible his mother is and how horrible he feels, and even though he got a promotion, he still doesn't feel good about himself at all. He still has the "I want to destroy myself" look. And then we find out that he has been going near the ISB headquarters at different points throughout different days, purposely trying to once again meet with Lieutenant Miro. And then he has the most pathetic and disgusting "I have a crush on you" moment in TV show / movie, even movie history. It is bad. Like, people always make fun of the "I hate sand, it's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere" moment in Attack of the Clones. People always make fun of Hayden Christensen for that. I really love Hayden Christensen in the prequels. And I've never had, a problem with that line. Because I'm a prequel guy. I was born with him, I was raised with him. But still, everybody's had a problem with it, for how cheesy of a line it is. Because it is, it's cheesy enough line. But this line has officially dethroned the sand line as the cheesiest line in all of Star Wars. Not so much because of the line itself, even though it is a horribly cheesy line. It's because of the circumstances. At least Anakin and Padme, like, you could already tell there were some things being set up in the first movie, in Phantom Menace. Even though, yes, Anakin was a 9-year-old and Padme was a 14-year-old, which is still weird. but not nearly as weird as this not even close to implied romance beforehand. Or attempted romance, I guess. I don't know what the mess it is. It's disgusting. Between Karn and Miro. Because Karn is like, he's talking to Miro, like, I've been waiting for you for like all these days, trying to meet up with you, because when I met you and you believed me about how bad Andor was, I realized that there still was justice out in the galaxy, and that you gave my life meaning again. You're the only reason my life has meaning. I love you. Will you kiss me and be with me? And it literally almost made me puke. I'm like, it was so gross because he's this skinny and he looked so pale. It was so weird how pale, like he looked unusually pale in that scene. And his eyes looked almost devoid of life. And Miro, logically, was like, dude, what the mess are you talking about? I could have you arrested like right now if I wanted to. Never speak to me again. I'm on her side. He's a creepy weirdo dork jerk guy. It was so out there and out of nowhere and just goofy and strange and ugh. It was like, again, what plan did they have for this guy? I mean, they start out the series, he has all these aspirations about rules and imperial governing. He has all these ideas about what is really oppression, but not in his mind. He has all these ideas about how oppression should be handled and how oppression should work. How they should, squeeze tighter all the systems in the Empire's grasp, even though he was just with, like, the corporate security guys at that point. But you could tell he had lofty ambitions for how, oppression should work. And he was a rule follower. So you figure he's on some kind of arc to, like, become an Imperial officer. And I guess he could still be. But, I mean, we're, like, way over halfway in the series. We only have 3 episodes left to go. And he's been moping around in his house for, like, what feels like years. That's how grueling his arc has been. And wearing stupid outfits and going to stupid work Star Wars places. He's only gotten contacted by the Empire and actually had a meetup with the Empire like once. An official one like once in the last episode since he was fired in the 4th one. We're on episode 9. And nothing has happened with his character. He was rejected by Miro because he was being unsettlingly, indescribably creepy. And so now I assume he's just gonna go destroy himself. Like he's clearly been wanting to do like this whole season. That's a terrible arc. I'm just like, I have all these ambitions, but I got fired. And now I'm sad. Now I'm even more sad. I got this job. It kind of sucks. And so now I got to meet with the Empire and this beautiful lady who's like twice my age. Not to mention. And this beautiful lady is here, and she's an Imperial, and she's rude and mean, just like an Imperial should be, and I love her, and I want to have her, and I need her in my life. She is important to me. I am only fulfilled by her existence. I have nothing but love for her. I only have meaning with her in my life. But she's rejected me, and I'm lost in the woods, like Kristoff. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just can't contain. I'm just sobbing over how indescribably stupid that is. Like that is dumb, guys. That's just stupid. That's stupid writing. And it's weird because in this episode there's actually some really good writing in other areas. But this one was just terrible. Like, I couldn't believe what I was watching when he started to almost like, essentially confess his love for her after meeting her like once. And it didn't even seem like that's what he was concerned about in the last episode. He just wanted to join the Empire and get revenge on Andor. That seemed like his arc. And now he loves this Imperial officer who definitely doesn't love him back with good reason. Meanwhile, Miro is looking into this rebel pilot who was captured by the Empire for stealing and he had stolen some Imperial tech, like Imperial masking technology that could, I guess, cloak his ship. And apparently the pilot was a guy who worked for the Anto Krieger person that was mentioned in the last episode that Luthen wanted Saw Gerrera to work with. And the pilot was tortured by the same guy who tortured Bix, and the pilot apparently revealed that the Anto Krieger was going to hit that Imperial facility that they mentioned in the last episode. So that is tying, I guess that's, that's tying together the ISB plot line and the Saw Gerrera Luthen talking about Anto Krieger, his destruction of that Imperial base plot line. So that is good. Those things are tying together, and they're going to try to trick Anto Krieger into thinking that the Empire doesn't know anything about Anto Krieger's operations. So we'll see how that plays out. The heist, or I guess the attack on the base, may take place in the show. We don't know. There's only 3 episodes left, but they are almost an hour long apiece. So could happen, could not. We'll see. And now Mon Mothma is talking to Tay, and apparently nothing happened to Tay, even though it seemed like something happened to Tay in the last episode. Apparently I didn't understand at all what that scene meant in the last episode, when Perrin was like, oh, Tay had to leave because he had an early morning, and then Mon Mothma walks away, and her smile slowly turns to concern and like fear, like, oh no, what happened? Is Tay hurt or something? Is he captured by the Empire? I thought that's what that meant, but apparently it didn't. Apparently Tay's totally fine. Maybe she was concerned because that meant that Tay had to leave early because he might have been almost found by the Empire. Again, that was not good tension building, because I was intrigued by that scene in the previous episode, and then, he's fine in this episode. You could have written that better. It's just, there's so much in this show you could have structured and written so much better. But she's talking to Tay about money stuff again, and Tay essentially gets to this point where he's like, well, we could contact this one guy who apparently is like really shifty. I forgot his name. I think his name is Davo something. And he's like, we could contact Davo and see if he can help with our, money problems. And Mon Mothma really doesn't want to contact this guy because apparently he's like really shady. And you can tell she's, again, like I mentioned before, she's getting to this point where she's kind of slowly starting to realize that if she really wants to be a rebel, she might have to do things that are not entirely moral. And definitely questionable, like working with questionable people, and again, a little shady. And she's not used to that. She's used to, Coruscant and getting to do, some under-the-table things for the right reasons, but work with people who are genuinely fighting for a cause and fighting against the Empire, not working with people who are kind of just in it for the money like this Davo guy seems to be. So she's realizing that you might have to bend the rules a little bit to be a rebellion, which is what Rogue One established. Rogue One established that the rebellion had to do some pretty shady and sometimes nasty things to get the job done. And I know that I had a huge problem with the stuff they did in Episode 6 with the rebel crew almost shooting a kid. That is crossing the line when it comes to children for me. And kidnapping a guy's wife and son when they've done nothing wrong. Like, that's hurting innocent people. And that's, turning innocent people to fear. Which is what the Empire does, which means the good guys shouldn't do it. And I get that, you have that, sometimes the good guys will go too far, but that's not really what the episodes seem to want to establish. It's like, oh, the good guys are going too far. The episodes seem to just kind of be rolling with it, which is why I didn't like it. In this case, you're having like money laundering and whatnot, like this guy who clearly does under the table money stuff. That's obviously not going too far. Like, you can write that in the story. That's not really crossing any lines. I just feel like the child thing definitely, doing the child thing and saying that, okay, it's all right because they're trying to stop the Empire, like, that was wrong. But this, you're not hurting any children in this situation, so this is why I don't really have a problem with it. It was interesting to see Mon Mothma kind of experiencing this. At first I was kind of like, really? She's timid about like this? Like, doesn't she want to fight the Empire at all? Does she have any backbone when it comes to this kind of stuff? But I mean, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, okay, yes, she's been a senator her whole life. She's not used to this like super shady stuff. Like, she's done a few shady things here and there, but not like this, like dealing with, practical drug dealers and mob bosses and, actually having to hurt people like Luthen is doing to start the rebellion. She's not used to this kind of stuff. So it makes sense seeing her have to come to terms with that. And it is a cool thing to see when you look at it like that. But then you come to the slam banger finish of the episode. And so, this finish ties back to like earlier stuff in the episode where Andor again is walking through the hallway with all the other prisoners and Kino, and Andy Serkis' character. And the other prisoners start saying like, You guys heard what happened on level 2? Like, they killed everybody. They killed everybody on level 2, and all the guys are like, what? And once again, Kino's like, okay, we need to keep our mouths shut. And even Andor says to Kino, he's like, the less the Empire thinks we know about the situation, the better. So then Kino's like, okay, this is a rumor. We don't know if it's true. Could be, could not be. But we just need to wait until we can figure out what's going on, because Kino clearly knows something is going on. But before that scene, Andor was trying to get Kino to tell Andor how many guards are usually on each level apiece. And Kino won't tell him because Kino just wants to, live out the rest of the days doing his shifts so he can get out of prison. He has like 217 shifts left. And Andor's like, you think they care what we talk about in here? Like, they just care that they have us under wraps. And like, they care about their, the frying floors and the security. Like, they don't really care about what we say. And Kino isn't buying any of Andor's stuff. Like, he doesn't want to escape. He's fine where he is. He doesn't want to attempt it. Kino literally thinks that, like, if you try to escape, you're just going to die. I'm going to, play it out, do the rest of my sentence. And Melshi, one of the other prisoners, has already been talking about, like, the Empire's never going to let you leave. Like, whatever sentence you got, it doesn't matter. Like, they will make you stay as long as they need you to stay. But Kino is like, they'll let us leave. Like, he believes that he'll just get to leave when the Empire says that they get to leave. And Andor's, of course, mad at him, because Andor's convinced that the Empire isn't actually listening to what they're saying in the cells, so they can try to figure out an escape plan, but Kino doesn't want to. And so, you have that. Then you have this scene where the other prisoners mentioned that, like, 100 prisoners were killed on level 2, and Kino's like, okay, what's going on? And then at the end, after the Andor and his crew at their specific table have done the factory work, and they, like, win their competition, like, they do the most work of all the prisoners, the old guy, Ulaf, starts to pass out. And they, grabbing him, and this is, again, the moment where you see, like, Kino, he is a dude with a heart, and he's like, okay, get a medic, we need to help Ulaf. And they get the medic, and it's just Andor and Kino and the medic trying to help Ulaf, who's, he's passed out, essentially. Kino's explaining to the medic, he's like, this guy, Ulaf, he only has 40 shifts to go. He's almost going to be able to go home. We just need to get him, give him some kind of medical thing that'll get him up on his feet long enough to carry out those shifts so he can just go home. So he can be released from prison. And the medical guy's essentially like, oh, none of that matters now. And then he says that Ulaf has had a stroke. And the medical guy just injects Ulaf with something to give him a peaceful death right then and there. Which is really sad. And I genuinely did feel sad because Ulaf only had 40 days to go. So that was a genuinely saddening feeling. So the show made me feel something emotional, which is good. But the medic says something to the effect of, what he's got right now, this peaceful death, is way better than what we're about to get in the next week. And Andor and Kino at this point are both like, what are you talking about? Like, Andor's been wanting to get out this whole time, but Kino's had reservations. But it's cool because, again, Andy Serkis' acting is phenomenal. You see the expression on Kino's face, he's like, it's slowly turning more to like, okay, what is going on? What happened on level 2? Because Andor asks the medic first, and the medic doesn't answer. But then Kino asks, like, what happened on level 2? Because clearly that has something to do with what the medic's saying. And the medic reveals that apparently the Empire made a mistake, which I don't think it was a mistake. I think they're trying to play that it actually really wasn't a mistake. And that a guy who was released on level 4 from prison, was like released, was let go, ended up back on level 2 the next day. And when the prisoners started talking about it, the Empire killed them all on that level. Killed 100 dudes. And it took me a while to actually understand that's what they were trying to say. But once I did, I was like, oh, okay. That goes in line with the Empire we've seen before. That is horrible. But that is something like that is the horrible thing, that the kind of thing that the Empire would do. So that was crazy. And the medic's like, you need to keep your men in line. He's talking to Kino. He's like, you need to keep your men in line. So the Empire doesn't actually let anyone leave. They can release someone, just bring them to a different level. So the guys on the level 4, I guess, thought the guy was released. But then The same guy just ended up on a different level in the prison. Still in prison. The Empire didn't actually let him out. So if Olaf was released, he probably would have just ended up the same way, on a different level, and then would have died anyway. So he got to have a peaceful death then and there, after having a stroke, while the other prisoners are kind of like, oh, we are in big trouble. So you just see the expression on Kino's face. He's just angry. He gets angrier and angrier, but at the same time more and more fearful, after realizing like, oh, I wanted to leave, and I was so concerned about leaving and just finishing up my shifts, but now I realize that nobody actually gets to leave. That either we stay and work in this prison for the rest of our lives unlawfully, or we die. And this was phenomenal writing. Andor and Kino walk away with their hands on their head, because, you know, that's how the prison thing works. And Andor asks him one more time. He asks Kino one more time, how many guards are there on each level? And when Andor said that, I was like, is Kino gonna tell him? Is Kino gonna tell him? And Kino says, never more than 12. And you see this expression of fear on his face, but you also know, like, he's deadly serious. Like, they're going to take down these guys after what happened. And that was great tension building, and that was great payoff, and that was great execution, which is what I wanted more of this show to be. I wished every storyline was like that. I wished every plot line was like that. I wish it had that moment of tension building, putting this in place, putting that in place, just to make you a little bit more curious, and then BAM! Which they have in some areas as far as the setup goes. They've built some tensions, but they haven't paid it off good. Like the whole Aldani stuff. Setting up this character, and this character has a backstory, and this character has a backstory, and now they're all dead because they're just all dead, and they didn't really actually matter. But this was good, though. And again, I'm really glad that they gave Kino an actual heart, and that he is a good guy. Even though he's mean, he's still a good guy at heart. I'm glad they didn't just give Andy Serkis another, you know, hey, you get to be this cool character for 0.2 seconds and then, you know, gone, whatever. They at least allowed him to have, like, a heart and kind of like an arc in this story, which I appreciated. I hope he doesn't die in the next episode. Speaking of which, the next episode does need to be the prison break. If the next episode ends up being like a hour-long episode of how they're going to plan to escape the prison, like they did with, like they pulled with the Aldani thing, no. The next episode needs to be the prison break. You had the tension of Kino explaining to Andor how many guards there actually were, which means that Kino's in on it. That Kino's going to help Andor escape. Pay it off. In the next episode, pay that off. Have Andor go back to the pipe that he was trying to cut earlier. Put all of that together. Put all of these little different setups together and have the actual prison break happen. Don't waste any more time talking about stuff that doesn't need to be talked about. I don't need to see every minute, nuanced little detail of how they planned for this and that, this and that, and this and that. Because let's be honest, if they did that in the original trilogy, if they did that in the prequel trilogy, if they did that in Clone Wars and Rebels, like every time, like every single time, I know they do it for a lot of the plans, but like every single plan that they had, if they did that, that would get really boring. Which is what this show has been sometimes. It's like, okay, we need to explain this part, and this part, this part, this part. Sometimes not explaining something is okay if you do it in a right way. Because the audience is not stupid. The audience can figure things out. Let us figure things out. That's what I want from Andor. Just let us figure out a few things. Did we need episode 5 of Andor? Not really. Could have just had episode 4, and then 6, and then done. Yes, episode 5 was kind of trying to establish more of the relationships between the prisoners and Andor, but again, it had horrible payoff in episode 6, so it rendered like none of it mattered after that. This episode actually was like, okay, stuff is starting to matter. And it was getting a little bit more interesting, except for the attempted romance, Karn, meltdown, explosion of Hurl. But the prison break needs to be next episode. That definitely needs to be next episode, and it needs to have good payoff. I don't want Kino to die, but if he does die, it needs to be like a sacrifice himself kind of death. If he does die, that's how I want him to go out, but I don't want him to die. He can totally be used for other cool stuff, like escaped convict in the Imperial world, like, and he could come back for a season 2. Like, that would be pretty cool. But that's basically everything in the episode that intrigued me, And there was a lot more than usual, so I appreciated that. Again, overall, I give the thumbs up like this. Definitely some more stuff that I was like, oh, like the Bell reveal and Mon Mothma kind of, you know, getting more of that sense of her being more scared of the shady stuff she has to do. And then the Kino Andor prison stuff, that part was good. Those parts were good. I appreciated those parts. The Karn part was terrible. I need them to at least try to save his arc in some way, shape, form, or fashion. That is my review for Andor Episode 9. Thank you guys for watching The Son of Wonder. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell for notifications. Thank you guys very much for watching. Have a very blessed day. May the Force be with you. May the Lord be with you. Goodbye. This fell. And that's a wrap.